Hey guys, I'm Nazir and we are back today in Wonderdraft to pick up where we left off last time. So on the last video we looked at Fjellheim and Avilfjord and we had the sort of rough continental mass there but fleshed the rest in. Eros I've left pretty much unchanged for now, but we'll return to that in a later video. So far today I want to focus on this area in the northeast. Another area I know is going to be relatively cold, but I'm not quite happy with the landmass that's there already, so I'm just going to start from scratch. So you see me here using the land painter tool to first just get a rough area for where I want the landmass to be. Decided to get rid of that eastern portion near Duan as well, to leave that as open ocean rather than it connect off into the edge of the map. You'll notice as I go round to fine tune some of the edges of the land masses as well, I'll put the roughness back on the brush to make it look more like a natural coastline, and add in a few small sort of islands. This northern area in particular should be treacherous to pass by ship if it's even possible at all. So that represents your sort of, floating icebergs and things. So for the more southern coastlines, the coastlines that aren't completely frozen, I'm using a softer brush on the edges, not quite as rough as what I've used to the north. I'm going to make this area sort of like an inland sea as well, with a few small islands here and there. Almost like the Mediterranean, but far further north. Once I'm broadly happy with the landmass, that's when I switch to first the mountains and then the hills, because that'll give me an idea of where everything else needs to go then. And farm mountains, I won't turn this into a lesson on tectonics, but they broadly follow the same sort of lines and curves. So you'll notice the large mountain ranges that I'm placing here on this new landmass roughly aligned to those that had already placed further south on the continent. Then once your mountains and hills are in place, you can use that as a guide then for the rivers, so where the river basins should logically be and where the rivers should flow from. what's very handy in Wonderdraft is as you are drawing a river, after each point you can just use the scroll wheel to increase the thickness of the river, so you can get that effect of it getting wider and wider as it gets closer to the coast. Now this area as a whole, this new landmass, is not one I'd planned for in the sort of lore and world building, but I envisage because it's going to be cold, you're going to have a lot of open plains, plus a lot of areas that are difficult to pass with tall mountain ranges. I imagine some kind of perhaps semi-nomadic culture living here, probably relying quite heavily on herd animals, horses or something similar, that they would sort of bring around with them as they migrate. One thing I don't really have in my world at the moment is any kind of sort of Native American influence, so maybe I'll drop some of that into the people of this area. So a quick point on lakes as well. Typically you could have a number of rivers flowing into a lake, but usually only one river flowing out of it. And that's because the water will take the path of least resistance. mentioned earlier, the people of this area, perhaps they're nomadic, perhaps they, migrate around on horseback, in which case what I'd like to have in this landmass is an area of plains as well. So I think I'll put that to the east, sort of like a wide open steppe where they can sort of roam and hunt, where you don't have to worry too much about the impassable mountains that we have to the west and to the south. And perhaps what we could have then is within the mountains, perhaps protected somewhat by the valleys from the wind and the rain, is more semi-permanent structures where these people retreat to then in the winter. So you can sort of see with this as well how the geography of the area can sort of start to help inform how the people there might live and what their culture might look like. So now that I'm happy with the rivers, moving again onto the trees. Because we're fairly far north, I don't want the forest to be too dense. It shouldn't look too lush, as it were. But you might still have these, fairly dense pine forests in certain places, especially further south of the landmass. So you'll see I'm placing the clusters of trees around the bodies of water, around that lake, where you're going to get the biggest forests. As we go further east, I want to leave that northeastern area as that plain, that steppe that we talked about. So I'm not going to put quite as many trees as we go up, thin them out a bit. that sort of grass asset as well, just to fill in some of the gaps and give that look of, you know, open grassy plains. But once again, more spread out as we go further north. So back to these small islands, just polish these off now as well. Dropping in a few of the oak tree assets as well, just to show that we're a little further south, a little warmer. And now lastly onto colouring. So because I've already got another landmass to the west, I need to roughly match that in terms of climate and colouring. So I'm starting with the white, getting a rough gauge of where my snow line should be, copying that grey then to start on the mountains. For some of the hills. So my first pass is usually a little rough, but I can always come back and tidy that up later on. So I'm switching over to a green here for the southern areas, and generally following the green sort of up the rivers and around the lake as well, because that's where you're going to get the most vegetation, is near the water. And there we have it. So I've named this area Chantitlan, which is a sort of Aztec-inspired name. So I hope you'll join me again on the next video, where we're going to look at the continent more broadly and start to label some of our other areas and countries that I want to separate out. Cheers, guys.